So good day, everyone. This episode is talking about the second house and its 12 other derivative meanings. And so for the purpose of this series, this episode will be, as usual, be available for my YouTube channel members first before it's released to the public. And if you want to find out more about how to join this YouTube channel as a member, the link is actually in the description box. And so without further ado, let's move on to this episode's content. And we will be talking about the second house and the 12 other derivative meanings of the second house. And first and foremost, let's start from the beginning because the area of concern, it needs to end up at the second house. So if we actually, from this arrow, what it actually represents, the second house is actually the first from the second. So we're going to combine the meanings of the first house and then the area of concern being the second house cusp. And so if we actually intermingle these two meanings together, this can actually represent the condition, the appearance of one's possessions. And the second house, which is the area of concern, can also be talking about bonds as investment itself. So if you want to talk about how is your bonds functioning if you have bought any of those, by using the derivative house method, we can actually look at what's the condition of that. How is it faring, for example? And other meanings I can think of when I think about the first from the second house will be the actions that's taken to acquire resources or attributes which give one a sense of value or worth or esteem, self-esteem that is. And another thing I can think of is something along the lines of characteristics of inherent faculties or capabilities which one can develop further. And this may also be talking about what constitutes security for a person. Because the first from something is like the definition of something. So what constitutes actually comes in. And the first from any house is also talking about the first impressions of something. So from the second, which is where the arrow is pointing to, this can give rise to the delineation of the first impressions of one's desire nature, because that's what the second house is about. And the second house also is talking about the vocal cords or the voice itself as well. And if we actually move one house backwards, and so from here, we need to get the resultant house equals the second. So the first house is the second from the first. And if we actually combine the second divisional house from the first, combining these two things together, the meaning slightly changes. And this can be talking about the resources acquired from the focus that one brings into life. This may also be talking about the energy level that's generated from our physical vitality, constitution, or health. This may also be talking about the money and finances of one's maternal grandfather or paternal grandmother, because the first house, if we use further derivatives, the first house can be talking about the maternal grandfather or the paternal grandmother, like I've mentioned before in previous episodes. And last but not least, this may also be talking about what one attaches oneself to object-wise in one's early childhood environment, because one's early childhood environment can also be inferring the first house, and we need to have two divisional houses in order to land in our resultant house, which is the second. And if we actually move further back, we will have, okay, we will start from the 12th house and we need to end up at the second. So it's the third from the 12th house. And this may actually be talking about the environmental factors that leads one to display compassion and empathy. And third from itself can also be talking about siblings, aunties and uncles, or relatives and cousins as well. So this may be talking about the siblings, aunties and uncles, relatives and cousins, and even neighbors, because the neighbors is basically ruled by three divisional houses in terms of meaning, of one's secret enemies, which is the 12th house. So I just want to repeat, this can be inferring to the siblings, aunties and uncles, relatives, cousins, and also neighbors of one's hidden enemies or clandestine associations, by the way, which is the domain of the 12th house as well. And this may also be talking about one's relativity, communication style, to, or mentality of one's paternal relatives or godfather figure as well. This may also be talking about the short travel journeys from unconscious compulsions. And unconscious compulsions comes from the 12th house. And the third from the 12th, which results in the second, may also be talking about the intuitive grasp of how the individual mind is linked to others. This is a more abstract kind of delineation. And on top of that, this can also be talking about the mental ego or the concrete mind, because there's the third divisional house meaning of one's internal and external saboteur, because one's external or internal saboteur is coming from the 12th house in essence. And the third from the 12th, which results in the second house, can also be talking about one's innate, I would call it talent, in terms of channeling information from the astral plane, because astral plane is actually the 12th house, and anything that is channeling information in essence is three divisional houses from something. Okay, and now let's move on quickly to the next one, which is starting from the 11th house. So the 11th house is 4 houses away from the second. So we got to combine the 4th from the 11th house meaning here. And anything that's 4 from itself can represent like endings and beginnings of some sorts. And the 11 can be talking about a friend with benefits, or a friend in general, or an acquaintance, an associate, or what I call a happy hour buddy. People that you just kind of bump into when you go to the pub for a drink, for example, that you don't know that well, but you know, why not just catch up and talk about superficial things in the pub? And so I attribute happy hour buddies coming from the 11th house cusp. So the 4th from the 11th, this can be the endings and beginnings of a relation with a friend friend with benefits, associates, and also happy hour buddy. And anything that's fourth from itself can also be talking about home, property, and private life or end of life as well. So the 11th house cast can be talking about a friend kind of figure in one's life. And the 11th house can also be one's stepchildren as well. And that's because your own children in general is ruled by the 5th house, the opposite house. And the 11th house is 7 houses away from the 5th, which is the children of a partner, which means your stepchildren. So if I were to combine the meaning, this can be the home, property, private life, or end of life of an acquaintance, like I mentioned before, like friends with benefits, associates, happy hour buddy. But this can also be talking about one's stepchildren as well in general. And anything that's far from itself can also be the rooting of something. And the 11th house can be talking about future aspirations, objectives, and hopes and wishes for the future. And so the 4th from the 11th, in which we end up with the 2nd house, can also represent the rooting of future aspirations, future hopes and dreams, and also objectives and goals as well. This can also be talking about one's inner base of operation, the 4th house, or 4th divisional placement or something, during encounters where one is actually pursuing one's aims or goals as well. And last but not least, the 4th from the 11th, this can actually give archetypal and characteristics and also description of one's family friend, because the 4th of something can mean family and the 11th is a friend, basically, like we discussed. So a family friend is the 4th from the 11th, in which we end up with the 2nd. And so now let's move on quickly to the next one. So for this one, we will be talking about the area of concern being the 10th house. And the 10th house and the 2nd house, it is basically the 5th from the 10th. That's how we end up with the 2nd house. If we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we gotta combine the meanings of the 5th division from something, and this time is from the 10th house. That's the area of concern. And if I actually combine the two together, this can actually be talking about what one does during downtime periods when one is in one's office, place of profession, vocation, or career, because that's what the 10th house is about. And anything that's the downtime, what you do during downtime periods, will be the 5th divisional house from something. And anything that's the 5th divisional house from something can also be talking about the joy, entertainment, and pleasures that's derived. And this time is from one's vocation and professional endeavors, the 10th. It can also be talking about the children and the recreational nature of one's employer or one's boss or one's authority figure that one reports to. And last but not least, what I can think of is that it may also be inferring the pleasures and speculations as in investments. It can also be talking about the love affairs as well, and also the inner child of one's parents. But this time, since we're talking about the 10th house that we assume as our area of concern, this may be talking about one's maternal figure. So if I were to combine the meanings together, this can be talking about the pleasures and speculative investments, and also love affairs and inner child of one's maternal figure growing up. So Now let's move on to the next one. So the area of concern, we will switch it to the ninth house. And the ninth house, if we actually count from the ninth to the second, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's the sixth house from the ninth. Okay, so we got to combine the sixth from the ninth in order to achieve our goal here in terms of getting the meanings of things. And with this, this can be talking about that which serves the sixth divisional house from something, one's view of one's journey, and what actually pulls one forward in life. That is the ninth house meaning. And this can also be talking about one's regular or daily spiritual, divinity, metaphysically driven rituals. So I just want to repeat, one's regular or daily, that's the sixth divisional house from something, spiritual, divinity, and metaphysically driven rituals, that's the ninth house. So it's the sixth from the ninth. And this can also be talking about the health and the servants of something, sixth divisional house from something. From the ninth, this can be one's brother or sister-in-law, or brothers or sisters-in-law. That's the ninth house, basically. Because the ninth house is basically 3 houses away from the seventh, the siblings of one's partner. So this can be the house, which is the ninth house of one's brothers and sisters-in-law. And if I go further and count 6 houses, this adds on the meaning of the health and servants of theirs, in this case. And last but not least, anything that's 6 divisional houses away from something, this can be the perfection process of something. From the ninth, this can be the search for meaning, purpose, direction, and guidelines in life. So if I were to combine these two into one complete sentence, the sixth from the ninth can also be talking about the perfection process that one undergoes during the search for one's meaning, purpose, direction, and guidelines in life. So now let's quickly move on to the next little bit. And now the area of concern now will be falling into the 8th house. And if we were to count the 8th house and we need to end up at the 2nd house, this is 7 houses away from the 8th. So the 2nd house is basically the 7th from the 8th house, in essence. And if we actually combine the 7th from the 8th, this can be the partner's taxes, loans, and inheritances that you have a share of if you were to couple up with that individual, because it's the 7th from the 8th. The 8th is the partner's taxes, loans, and inheritances. And because it's the 7th divisional house from something, this means that you are involved with that person in terms of mutual commitments. And therefore, you stand to also benefit in essence. And the 7th divisional house from the 8th can also be talking about one's commitment and active engagement to the occult, because the 8th house is anything that deals with the occult and the mysterious and also the mysteries of life, in which there's a veil separating you with that realm or reality of things. And on top of that, this may also be describing going to lower courts, that's the 7th divisional house meaning, for things that are shared between people. Because the 8th house, which is the area of concern, deals with shared resources. And now let's move on quickly to the next one. So this time we start off with the seventh house as our main area of concern. So the seventh house is 8 divisional houses away from the 7. That's how we end up with the second house, the resultant house that we are talking about in this episode. So I got to combine the meanings of the 8th from the 7th house. And this may be talking about the investment of finances and energy and intimacy as well into our committed partnerships or relationships. The 7th house can also be talking about business partnerships as well. It's not only our loved ones in which we engage with on a one-to-one basis. Another meaning I can think of, which is the 8th from the 7th, this can be talking about the death and rebirth of one's partner or public enemy as well, because public enemy talks about the 7th house in essence. This may also be inferring to the legacy or the death of a paternal grandfather or maternal grandfather. Because when we talk about the paternal grandfather or maternal grandmother, this is basically ruled by the 7th house cusp in our charts. And anything that's 8 divisional houses from itself represents like the legacy or the conditions surrounding the transitional phase of passing. And another meaning I can think of will be the inheritance and the core sexual identity, which is 8 divisional houses. This can mean one's core sexual identity, by the way. Crisis situations, legacy. Anything that's 8 divisional houses away can also be talking about financial reverses. So if I were to put everything together, this can represent the inheritance, core sexual identity, crisis situations, legacy, and financial reversals belonging to our marriage partner and also our second child as well, because the second child is represented by the 7th house cusp. Our first child is represented by our 5th house cusp, and then the 7th house is 3 houses, 3 divisional placements away. So it's the sibling of our firstborn child. So the 7th house cusp here represents our second-born child. And if we actually move on to the next one, let me just clear this. And if we actually start off with the area of concern being the 6th house. So the 6th house, if we want to end up with the second house, we got to count 9 divisional houses. So we got to combine the meanings of the 9th from the 6th house and combine those 2 meanings together. And this can be talking about the purpose, which is the 9th divisional placement of something, behind one's discrimination and selectivity, which is the 6th house in its core meaning. This may also be talking about the metaphysical reasons or overseas travel being behind one's existing health issues and diseases. Because the 9th divisional house away from something can represent the metaphysical reasons and also represent overseas travels. And of course, the 6th house represents one's health issues and diseases. Another meaning I can think of will be the innate ability to perceive cosmic significance in the smallest details of life. Cosmic significance represents the 9 divisional houses away, and the 6th house, in essence, represents the smallest details of life, the minutiae of life, basically. And what I can think of as well, this may also highlight the potential many differences of opinion with your in-laws, which is the 9th divisional placement away from something, over the management of one's daily affairs, which is the 6th house, our area of concern. And now let's move on to our area of concern being the 5th house. So the 5th house is actually 10 divisional houses away from the 2nd. So it's the 10th from the 5th. If I actually think about the combination of the 10th from the 5th, this can be talking about making a profession or career of one's hobby or pastime. This may also be talking about the profession or the career life, which involves interactions with children. Because the 5th house represents children. The 5th house can also represent our enterprise, our baby, not only physical baby, but also like the creative endeavors and enterprises that we built from our own inspirations. The next thing I can think of will be the reputation, profession, and standing of one's children, particularly the firstborn. And this may also be talking about one's reputation regarding one's hobbies and sports activities as well, because that's what the 5th house is talking about. This may also be inferring to being well known for speculative or risky investments or love affairs in which one is involved in that's being creatively expressed as well. And last but not least, this may be talking about the shaping parent of one's children, particularly the firstborn. Because anything that's 10 divisional houses from itself, this can infer the shaping parent archetype. Because it's from the 5th, and the 5th represents our firstborn children. So combining that together, it's about the shaping parent of one's children. This can be in general, but particularly over your firstborn's influence. That is. So now let's move on to the area of concern being the 4th. So if we were to count clockwise from the 4th house cusp, we need to count 11 houses from the 4th in order to end up with the 2nd. So the 2nd house equals the 11th from the 4th. So 11th from the 4th, this can be talking about the sphere of influence of one's origins, family, and home and background as well. The 4th can also be talking about lineage or heritage of something. The 4th can also be talking about one's early home life. And this may be also talking about the paternal figure growing up, in which case this is mostly the fatherly figure. Unless, of course, you are from a single parent household, in which the 4th and 10th, I give it more leeway, because usually, like if you are from a second from a single parent household, the parent usually has to play both roles to some capacity. So I repeat, the 11th from the 4th, this can be talking about the sphere of influence of one's origins, family, home, cultural lineage and heritage, early home life, and also paternal figure growing up, in which case this can be mostly the fatherly figure. And another meaning I can think of will be the organizations and groups that belong to one's grassroots connections. Anything that's grassroots in terms of connection, this is the this will be the 4th house meaning. And another derivative meaning I can think of the 11th from the 4th, this can be talking about the friendships that are close and private in nature. That's the 4th house meaning in its core. This can also be talking about friendship connections or group meetings that occur in the comfort of one's own home. So for people who actually hold a lot of meetings in the comfort of one's own home, this is where it comes from, the 11th from the 4th. And last but not least, the 11th from the 4th, this can be talking about aspirations in reforming attitudes and trends within one's homeland or one's cultural heritage and background as well. So now let's move on to the next one, which is the last combination. So if we start from the 3rd house as our main area of concern, we gotta count 12 divisional houses away so that we end up with the 2nd house. This is what we want. So it's, in essence, the 12th from the 3rd. Anything that's 12 divisional houses away can be the loss of something. The 3rd house can be like a cousin type of figure, a sibling type of figure, or an auntie, uncle type of figure. So if we combine the 12th from the 3rd, we actually have the loss of a cousin, sibling, or aunt, uncle type of figure in your life. And anything that is 12 divisional houses away, this can be something that is paranormal. This can be a haunting of sorts. Anything that's 12 divisional houses away can also be dream time. Because 12 divisional houses away, this may represent a place in which this can be our bedroom. But anything that's 12 divisional houses away can also be the astral realm as well, like I mentioned earlier in this episode, from the 3rd. So this can be the paranormal, haunting, or dreamtime experiences that's being translated or converted into writing or some form of blog, podcast, or book. That's the 3rd house in essence. It's a communication-based house. And this may also be talking about imaginative thoughts and psychic imprints. Both imaginative thoughts and psychic imprints are 12 divisional houses away. And since we are starting from the 3rd, which is a communication house, this can be converting them into written books and podcasts and YouTube videos, so on and so forth. Anything that's 12 divisional houses away, this can be indicating some kind of sorrow and grief. and loss, like I mentioned earlier, from the third. This is the mental state of one's mind on a daily basis. So if I were to combine the meanings of these two parts together, this can be the sorrow, the grief, and the loss that occupy one's mind on a daily basis. 12 divisional houses away from the third. This may also be describing a meditation teacher as well. And since we have the resultant house being the second, you can earn money from it, because the second house, in essence, is about the money that goes into our bank account, our earnings. Anything that's 12 divisional houses away, this can be talking about spirit guides. And because we are starting from the third, this can be some kind of contacting involved. So this can be inferring to contacting spirit guides is what one teaches. Because the third house can also be a teaching house on top of the ninth house as well. And anything that's 12 houses away from itself can be the self-destruction or the self-undoing of something. And the third house, which is the area of concern, talks about one's siblings, cousins, aunts and uncles, neighbors. So this can be the self-destruction and the self-undoing of one's siblings, aunts and uncles, neighbors, and also cousin figure. So this is, in a very quick snapshot, what I can think of if we were to go around the wheel, cooking up the different combinations so that we have the derivative house meanings from for the second house for this episode. So please give a thumbs up and remember to subscribe. And if you want to have early access to this video, in which I'll personally respond as quick as possible to those comments, you may want to contemplate joining this YouTube channel as a member, and the link will be in the description box below. So till next time, take care and see you soon.